Alright guys, so today we are looking at a comparison between the Legacy Pro, Vatic Pro, Vatic Flash, CRBN 1X14, and the CRBN 1X16. Alright, I know this isn't a CRBN 1X16. I actually lent my CRBN 1X16 to my buddy Donko, so you can just use your imagination. And I'll also throw in the Hyperion 14mm just for good measure here and there as well. Now, I'm comparing all these paddles because they seem to be all the rage right now, and you guys keep on asking me about them, like what's the differences, trying to make the right choices. So this video is for you, and unfortunately I don't have any of the 6.0 paddles to compare them to. I am still waiting for those in the mail with bated breath like many of you.
We're waiting! SpongeBob? What are we waiting for?
Alright, I also want to let you guys know before we get started that I've had the most time on court with the Yola Hyperion 14mm, then the Legacy Pro, then the CRBNs, then the Vatic. So take what I say and my opinions with a grain of salt or a pinch, or any other spices that you might fancy. I just want to first start off by saying that all these paddles are really, really good, and that I don't think you would regret choosing any of them. But I'm here to help you choose anyways, because I know that you guys want to use me as a scapegoat to blame for your buyer's remorse. So to that, I say you're welcome and glad to be of service. I take payments in likes, comments, and subscriptions. In this video, I'll be ranking all the paddles in the following categories: power, spin, control/touch, and then I'll go over my recommendations. Let's first go over the power list. At number 1, we have the Legacy Pro. Tied for number 2, the CRBN 1X 14mm and the Hyperion 14mm. Then, not far behind in third is the CRBN 1X 16mm. Then, followed by the Vatic Pro. Then, at last, we have the Vatic Flash. All right, at number 1, the Legacy Pro wins, like pretty much hands down right here. It has the most noticeable pop and power of any of these paddles right here. In my full review of the Legacy Pro, I stated that it was a control paddle that leaned more towards power, but I think the more that I play with it, I might redact that statement. I might actually say it is more of a power paddle that leans control. And the reason I say that is because, well, I was playing with the Legacy Pro for a good amount of time, and I think I adjusted to it rather quickly. And also I was coming from the Vanguard Power Air, so the Legacy Pro just felt really controllable in comparison. But then as I was playing with, you know, more with the Yolas, more with the CRBN and the Vatics, I was like, oh man, switching from those and going back to Legacy Pro, it did take more of an adjustment than I had thought previously. And then also I've let a few other people play with the Legacy Pro, and all these players are really good too. They come from control paddles. A lot of them play with 16mm paddles and, you know, Vanguard 2.0s, some paddle techs, some 16mm Yolas as well, and they all felt like the Legacy Pro was a little hard to control and a little too poppy for their liking. I will say that I think that to really bring out the true potential of the Legacy Pro, you really have to have your strokes and your techniques down. All right, coming tied at number 2, we got the CRBN 1X 14mm and the Yola Hyperion 14mm. No surprise there, they're both 14mm paddles, elongated, and you know, you expect a little bit more pop and power from a 14mm paddle. They both play fairly similarly. They're both really quick, they have good spin, good pop, and coming in at a very close third is the CRBN 1X 16mm. Now, the CRBN X 16mm came in at a really close third place, and to be quite honest with you, it probably could have switched to the number 2 spot between its 14mm counterparts. And the only reason I say that is because it's a better control paddle, but if you really want to put away a ball, like, you definitely can. It's not like it's really lacking power. If you want to summon that power, you definitely can. And it's also a question of really where you want that power. From the baseline in the transition area, the CRBN 16mm can actually generate more power, or I guess more court penetration, just because it's heavier and that swing weight really helps you just drive the ball through. Now, if you need power at the no volley zone or at the kitchen line in fast hand battles and exchanges, then the Carbon 14mm and the Hyperion 14mm might be the way to go instead, just because the balls kind of deflect off their faces a little bit quicker. But as soon as the ball leaves their face, I feel like they kind of lose their velocity a bit. And of course, that can probably be mitigated with a little extra weight added to the paddle. All right, next up we have the Vatic Pro. There's not much I really need to say about this paddle. I think it's a great all-court paddle. For the price, it can generate power just as fine as the rest of them, but to me, it just falls a little short of the Carbon 16mm. You know, they both play fairly similarly, but the Carbon 16mm just feels more solid. And coming in last, we have the Vatic Flash. Now, you would think that the Flash coming in at 14mm would have more power, but it doesn't. And I think the reason why is because it is the lightest of these paddles, coming at a stock weight around 7.7 ounces, whereas the other paddles in this comparison averages around 8.1 to like 8.3. Don't get me wrong, the Flash has plenty of pop and like quick deflection off the face, but I just felt like I couldn't put balls away with this paddle. And I think that's due to the lighter weight. If anything, the Flash has the most speed out of the paddles. Like, it's just really maneuverable, really quick around the net, but the put away power definitely leaves more to be desired. All right, next category we're gonna go over is spin. And to be quite honest with you, all these paddles have amazing spin potential and probably more spin than many of us will ever need. So I don't have definitive like RPM numbers. I don't test spin numbers by marking balls and then counting rotations of the balls. What I can tell you just from play testing and feel is that all these paddles are in the top tier of spin. If I had to give a slight edge, the Legacy Pro would come in first, and then everything else is basically tied for second. Now, with that being said, I know we're all a little obsessed with these spin numbers and these RPM results, but I'm here to tell you that with the amount of spin that these paddles are generating and how close they are, that they don't really matter all that much. To get those numbers that Chris or John Koo are posting about, you really have to do like a full out swing to really see the difference and to like match those numbers. To get those really high numbers that you see posted from Chris or John Koo or anybody else posting numbers about RPMs, you really have to do a full swing to get those numbers and to get that spin potential out of these paddles. And the reason why I don't think that it's, if you think about it, the majority of us are playing doubles. And in doubles, there's only a handful of times that you really get to set your feet and do a full swing to get those RPM numbers out of these paddles. The serve, the return, the third shot drive, and maybe the fifth shot. There are of course going to be scenarios and other situations where you find yourself out of position, where a strong drive or a heavy slice will be the right shot. But most of the time, you're going to be finding yourself at the no volley zone and the kitchen line dinking, resetting, dropping, blocking, doing half volleys, and doing these things with a little bit of spin, but you aren't going to be getting those insane RPM numbers that you see, nor do you need those insane RPM numbers to do the aforementioned things well. Maybe that extra spin potential is also good for your roll volleys, but even with that shot, you won't be producing those insane RPM numbers. You just need a paddle that can generate you just enough spin so you can roll those balls in. And I'm telling you right now that all these paddles have more than enough spin to execute these shots really well. What I'm trying to get at is these paddles get more than enough spin when compared against each other, and in my opinion should probably be one of the last metrics you use when making your purchase decision, unless you play a fair amount of singles where you have more opportunities to bring out the full spin potential of these paddles. All right, next we got the control and touch category. Now, control is tricky because control is subjective. Control to one player may be the firm and crisp response of a gearbox paddle. To another player, it could be the soft, absorbing feeling of a Selkirk Vanguard 2.0. Now, I define control as doing the shots that I want, when I want, and doing them well. With that being said, here are my control rankings for these paddles. At number 1, we have the Carbon 1X 16mm. At number 2, we have the Vatic Pro. At number 3, we have a three-way tie between the Carbon 1X 14mm, the Hyperion 14mm, and the Legacy Pro. Finishing at last again is the Vatic Flash. The Carbon 1X 16mm is just an all-court beast, and I think one of the best paddles out on the market right now. It just does everything really, really well. If you were a fan of the Yola Hyperion 16mm CFS, then you'd probably be a fan of the CRBNx 16mm. The only difference is that it's a little bit more expensive, but it's better built and better balanced. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we got the Vatic Pro 16mm. It's another great all-court option. Not much else to say about it. It just doesn't feel as solid as the Carbon 16mm. It has a little bit shorter handle and more surface area on the paddle face, so it's maybe a little bit more forgiving if you're not as precise with your shots. So you could potentially go for the Vatic Pro if you don't like the longer handle, or you could also go for the Carbon 2X 16mm as well, which is a more traditional shape. All right, now coming in tied at number 3, we got the CRBNx 14mm, the Hyperion 14mm, and the Legacy Pro. Now, the CRBNx 14mm and the Hyperion 14mm are what you would expect from 14mm paddles. Really poppy, and they deflect off the face rather quickly. So if you're a person who needs extra plushness, then the Carbon 14mm and the Hyperion 14mm may not be for you. Now, the Legacy Pro is really interesting because it's really hard for me to kind of describe to you how it feels with words. The word I would use to describe how quickly it comes off the face is that it's very lively. The closest analogy I can kind of come to is think of 2 different size trampolines. You have a smaller trampoline that represents the 14mm paddles, and then you have a larger trampoline that represents the Legacy Pro. So when you're jumping on the smaller trampoline, you actually get in the air pretty quickly, but then your velocity dies down, and then gravity pulls you back. Now on a larger trampoline, when you jump on it, it kind of pockets you a little bit, right? And then it shoots you up out of the air. And I think that's how I kind of would describe the Legacy Pro, and it messes up with people's timing, and I think that's why most people, when they pick up the Legacy Pro, they feel like it's really poppy and it's hard to control. So that was it. That was like my best explanation of how the Legacy Pro feels in terms of touch and control compared to some of the other paddles. And coming in at last place again, we have the Vatic Flash. It honestly plays and feels very similar to the other 14mm paddles on this list. I will say, however, that it is the most maneuverable and fast at the no volley zone. So if you like quick hand exchanges, this might be the one. Now, I know I put this low on the power list, but honestly, the ball deflects just as quick off the face as the other 14mm paddles. But the 7.7 ounce stock weight makes it feel like I don't have any put away power. The lightweight, I think, holds this paddle back, but also could be viewed as a huge positive. If you're a person who likes to customize your paddle with weight in different areas without making the static weight too high, then this could be a good option. All right, last but not least, let's go over price. At number 1, we got the Vatic Pro and the Vatic Flash coming in at $140. The Legacy Pro comes in next at $170, but right now there's a promo going on for $145. The Hyperion 14mm is of course $220, and the CRBNx comes in at $230. Now here are some of my recommendations. So if price isn't a factor, then your safest best bet in terms of all-around performance that checks all the boxes is the CRBNx 16mm. This paddle is definitely one of the best all-court paddles that I've ever play tested. If price is a concern for you and you really want just a great all-arounder, then the Vatic Pro is a really good option and can really serve a player from all different skill levels and different styles, from the beginner that's just starting to the regular tournament competitor. If you like pop and power, then the Legacy Pro is hands down the winner of the group. Despite being the most powerful paddle of the group, it still has a fair amount of control when compared to other power-centric paddles such as the Vanguard Power Air and the PICKLEBALL Black Ace. It also comes at a great price, but right now it's hard to come by. Now, if you value fast hand exchanges, then I think the Flash 7 actually comes out on top. It's the lightest of the bunch and also the shortest paddle within the group as well, and that really just helps with maneuverability and speed at the kitchen line. The Hyperion 14mm and the CRBNx 14mm may also be a great choice. However, they do come in at a higher price point than the Flash 7. Now, I almost forgot that I can't make a fair comparison of these paddles without mentioning access. At the time of recording of this video, the Legacy is back ordered until February. The Vatic still seems to be in stock on their site, and of course you can get the Hyperion and the Carbons from the company's site or your favorite major online pickleball retailer. Now, if you're interested in any of these paddles, please consider using my links or codes down in the description below for potential discounts. Full disclosure, I may or may not get a kickback if you decide to use my links in the description down below at no additional cost to you. That's it for this video. Till next time, play better. I'm out.